Almost every single cyclist uses power in their training, or at least knows what it is, but why haven't runners embraced it? How can we use it in our training, and what does it actually mean? We all know runners love their data, and running power is becoming more and more accessible through running watches, plus it can help you get more out of your workouts. So we've teamed up with Garmin to go through how to use it and why it's so useful, so more on that a little bit later. Plus I'll be going through how I use running power in my weekly workouts. But first, I want to know, do you use it? Let me know in the comments and let's dive in. So let's start with what actually is running power. Running power is a measure of how much work you're doing whilst you're running. It plays a significant role in performance, and ultimately, the more knowledge and control we have of our effort levels in different conditions, the more force we can generate efficiently, the more we can improve our running. Think of it as your internal effort measure. So it's measured in watts. The higher the number of watts, the more power you're generating. And in terms of numbers, it's a metric that gauges just how hard you're working. It's worth noting though that there are a few different things that affect power, like size and fitness. So don't go comparing your power to other people. Another interesting thing is that you use more muscles when you're running. So don't be surprised that your running power will be higher than your cycling power. But why use running power data? Pace and heart rate are two of the most used metrics, but think about running up a hill. If you're using pace, then you'll have to work harder. So if you're on a tempo run, it won't be a consistent effort. If you're using heart rate, you won't see an instantaneous change in your heart rate as you hit the hill. So similarly, it can be really hard to gauge your effort or intensity levels. So using power allows you to get an instant measurement and helps you to maintain effort levels across different surfaces, weather and elevation. Cyclists have been using power for years as the most reliable way to measure their training. It's measured usually through a gauge in the cranks or pedals that measures the amount of force being put through the bike, and that number directly relates to the speed the bike is going. Although you may be surprised to see that running power is much higher than cycling power, the benefits and effects are equal in both, so it's not too surprising that runners are now catching on too. For context, whilst I'm out on an easy cycle, my average power is around 110 to 120 watts, whereas on an easy run, my average power is around 300. But there is a big difference in how power is measured between running and cycling, so it doesn't really make sense to compare directly. Running power on a watch can't measure how much force goes into the ground, and a lot of runners' energy is used in other areas, so this would be less useful anyway. Instead, running power on a watch uses a number of sensors combined with other metrics such as pace, ground impact time, and incline in order to estimate a power number. You can use wrist-based running power from your Garmin smartwatch, making it more accessible to get a good estimate. But for more accurate data, you can also add accessories such as the HRM or a running dynamics pod. So does working on our running power allow us to perform better? Well, the more that we know about our own running, the more that we can help our own running efficiency. So if you're finding that you're getting fatigued easily, if you're struggling to maintain speed, or if you're regularly getting injured, then running power could be a good indicator to look at. For example, if you find that you're exerting less power as your heart rate increases, it might be an indicator that you're running less efficiently and vice versa. So you might want to look at improving your running form in order to save wasting all of that energy and potentially reduce your risk of injury too. Knowing your running power can also make it easier to pace yourself. Remember though that running power is not a one-size-fits-all. You could be running the exact same pace as someone next to you, but have completely different power measurements. Think of your body's energy as if it were a battery. If you run it in full power mode the whole time, it's likely to drain the battery quicker. But if you conserve energy, you can keep going for longer. Knowing your own body in different conditions could mean that this can help you come race day where you can train and compete optimally. There's lots of different ways that you can help improve your running power. You could incorporate hill sprints or drills, or my personal preference is to focus on strength work, specifically my core and lower body. Now I want to show you one of my favourite ways to use running power on my watch. The key advantage of power is it's a more immediate stat compared to heart rate, which could take a while to get up to the zone you want to be working in. So for a workout like threshold intervals on an undulating road, power is a great way of ensuring you don't go either too hard or not hard enough. Right, so I'm going to show you how I use running power by doing a threshold workout. So I'm going to do 2 lots of 10 minutes. The first 10 minutes, I'm going to be paying attention to heart rate and pace. So my Garmin has figured out for me that my threshold heart rate should be around 172 beats per minute, but it should on the flat equate to 5 minutes and 3 seconds per kilometre roughly. There is a hill in this, so this is going to be interesting. And then for the second lot of 10 minutes, I'm going to be doing it to power. So looking at my recent workouts, I think my threshold power should be around 330 watts. I've set alerts on my Garmin for heart rate and power. to make sure that I stay in the right zones, and I'm going to take 5 minutes in between, longer than I usually would for a workout like this, but I want to make sure that my heart rate is right back down to make it as fair a test as possible. Let's go. So for the first 10-minute test, I was raring to go. I hit what felt like the right effort relatively quickly and then tried to stick at it, keeping my heart rate in the right zone, but it took a while for my heart rate to come up. Okay, first bit of threshold. The pace is currently 4:45, but my heart rate isn't quite yet up. 165, 166, 167, and we are 90 seconds in. I'm just getting beeped at. Okay, I'm in range. And once it did, it carried on rising and went above threshold heart rate quite quickly. The alert told me it had gone too high, so I then had to back off the pace and slow down. 1 kilometre, 4:52, so quite a bit too fast. 173. One minute left. And stop. It's quite hard at threshold. Workout. That was interesting, that last section, because there is an uphill straight into a downhill. And what I found was happening is that as I reached the peak of the brow of the hill, my heart rate spiked. I think it went up to like 180 something. So then I backed right off, and then it took the whole of the downhill in order to settle back down. But actually by that point, I think on the uphill, I was running 4 something. And then on the downhill, I was running closer to like 5:20, which is quite a lot slower than what my threshold pace usually is, which just shows how long it takes for your heart rate to change. Whereas actually, I think power might be a bit more useful there. So I'm excited to do that hill again, to see the data. Not excited to run it again. Right, now time for the second lot of 10 minutes. I'm just gonna get my heart rate up a little bit more now that I've had my rest. So I'm starting at the same point, and then we're good to go. This second 10 minutes, I knew within the first 30 seconds whether I was on track, which psychologically took some of the guesswork out for me, so I relaxed a little bit more as I felt more confident I was operating at the right level. I did set off a bit too quick, but then my alert went off showing me that my power was too high, so I could rein in that speed before my heart rate reacted and went too high. Already power is beeping at me far more, so I'm just dialing back a bit to make sure that it's in range. Right now, average is 345, which is what we want. Current power is 368, so a little bit too high, but it says in range, so that's good. My pace and heart rate fluctuated due to some of the rises, but I did feel pretty consistent in my overall effort, so it was a very successful test. The bit that it was most useful on is the slight hill and then downhill section on this loop that I was doing. When I was going to heart rate, my heart rate didn't spike until I'd kind of come onto the downhill section, but when I was using power, my power instantly alerted me to saying that I was going harder, so I could back off, take the hill a little bit slower, and then tackle the downhill. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. Right, let's look at the stats. Okay, interesting. So this was using power, 1.97 kilometers, so less, but pace 5:05, so much better. Power, average 326, max 370, which is so much more consistent. So it just goes to show, like, power is good because that alert was buzzing at me so much more than the heart rate, because you go up a hill, your heart rate spikes, and you have to wait for it to drop back down. So the power alert is definitely staying on. A thing to note though is that power measures by the swinging of your arm, so it's not something that you can just hold and look at or it won't be accurate. So just as power is useful for serious cyclists to know how much power they can maintain and for how long, I can really see how it can be beneficial for runners too, to know how to pace ourselves optimally. Plus, if you love looking at the data, then this might be a really useful stat to look at when you head out on your next run. Equally though, if you are new to running, it might be something to bring in at a later point, or it might be something to just keep an eye on between your runs to see the different types of runs and the different variations in power. So I want to know, do you use power when you run, or is it a stat that you're going to look at now? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe whilst you're there. And if data is something that you really like, then check out this video where Jess goes through glucose and how that affects your running.